Today, we go through the story of Athens. This is our first story of, and today is Athens. The other stories that we'll be going through, the story of Rome, world religion, Britain, Russia, right? And then after the midterm, China, Japan, and the United States, one, two, three. All these other stories, they're more historically relevant in that, let's say, the story of Rome, that story still is relevant to us in some ways. Like the story of China, it's still the same China kind of thing, right? This is a unique story because the story of Athens kind of stands on its own, right? The story that we'll be going through today. Um, Actually, I have to say, I don't really know too much about modern Greece. So I'm sure if you were from Greece, you would say, no, this story is very relevant to, what we are today. But in terms of our world history, the stuff that we'll be covering today, in terms of the effect that this story has on world history is, I would say, minimal. So why are we covering the story of Athens? Because it's a fascinating story. And even though it's a story, it is history, and it has much to teach us. And also because, before I get to that, uh, today's story is in three acts. Act one is the Greco-Persian Wars. You have the dates there. And then quickly, I'll be going through the first Peloponnesian War, and then we'll concentrate more on the second Peloponnesian War. So it's a story told in three acts. Um, One of the reasons why the story of Athens is fascinating and important is because, um, especially Act One, the Persian War, Persian invasion of Greece, that story is told by Herodotus, who is called the father of history. He composed this book called Histories. Histories just means to like examine, question, to explain the ways of the gods to men. The work focuses on the Greco-Persian Wars, 499 to 479 BCE, and the theme of the book is hubris. That is the overarching or major theme of the book. And so that's what Act One, well, all the stories today will be about. It's about hubris. What is hubris? Overweening pride. Pride goeth before a fall, right? So that's what the book is about. This is why he wrote this book. And histories, this word histories has become the word that we know today as history. So this is the beginning of history as we know it. He's called the father of history, and he talks about the Greco-Persian War. And the other historian, he is also an important historian, Thucydides. He wrote the story of the Peloponnesian War. He was a contemporaneous person. He was actually alive. He wrote the book before the Peloponnesian War finished. So he was a contemporary of um, Pericles. And for him, someone like Pericles, the Athenian general, was his hero. And then he believed democracy can work, but only if it had the right leaders like Pericles. But he wrote the book before the end of the Peloponnesian War, so the book isn't complete. And then the third act, well, the second, Thucydides as well as Plutarch, who was another later, he was living in the Roman times. Plutarch, he was a Greek, I guess, he was Roman citizen as well, but he was Greek. So he was a Greek Roman citizen, historian, and he wrote a book called Parallel Lives of the Noble Greeks and Romans. Apparently, this is another famous book. I'm sorry, I haven't read the whole thing. I just read excerpts, just what is relevant for today. And so Act Three is as much a story of history as well as character studies. So in Act 3, we'll encounter these names, these characters named Nicias and Alcibiades. Alcibiades, one of the more famous names that we'll encounter in this course. Alcibiades, famous or maybe infamous. So that is what today's lecture is sort of based on, the stories told by Herodotus, Thucydides, and Plutarch. And because these are such famous names, that's why today's story is interesting, right? Today's story comes from the first historians. Okay, background to Greco-Persian Wars. This is where I talk about Iran a little bit. Well, this is Iran, right? By 6th century BCE, Persia was the biggest empire in the Middle East. Persia, by then, was the biggest empire in the Middle East. They believed in Zoroastrianism. I talked about this with the classical period last week, right? They worshipped a monotheistic god, Ahura Mazda, and in his name, they would fight for light and good, all that is good, and they would keep alive the sacred fire. So it was a great empire. Herodotus says Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Empire, so he's the founding figure around 550 BCE, was very wise because he was not a proud man. He was humble before his God. He knew not to stretch his empire too far. He was a wise man. And I don't want to take too much time with this guy, Cyrus the Great. I think I told you last time, first time I taught this course, I had an Iranian student in class, and I started talking about him as if he was one of the villains, because the Persians are the villains, and she got angry. No, nobody says Cyrus the Great is in any way a villain. And she was right. I was wrong. I just didn't know any better. He is considered one of the great figures in Persian history, a wise king. And since then, I realized Cyrus the Great is actually Cyrus, the king who appears in the Bible. He's actually a biblical figure as well. Jewish people love him because he is the anointed one. Sometimes in the Old Testament, he's known as a Messiah because he saved the Jewish people from the Babylonian slavery. He's the one who freed them to go back to Judah, and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. So he is that man. He is this servant of God. He was, by all accounts, a great man. And even today, Iranians would talk of Cyrus the Great as the founder of their great nation, just like Koreans talk about Tangun being the founder of Korea. So he was a great man, by all accounts. But his son-in-law, not his son, Darius the Great, he became king and he married Cyrus's daughter. So he became king by force. He was a great warrior, and he is known in in Iran today, again, as a great person. He is a hero to them. But we're not talking about objective history right now. We're talking about Herodotus. To Herodotus, Darius I was a foolish man. So he appears in Herodotus' story as a fool. He was not so wise. What happened at this time was the Ionian Greeks, who were like to the east of where Greece is, they were under the Persian Empire. They were one of the, I guess, colonies of Persian Empire. They tried to revolt against Persia, gain independence. And Athens helped them fight. And the revolt was put down. And then King Darius wanted to punish the Greeks. And also maybe he was ambitious. He wanted to conquer more land. He wanted to punish the Greeks for their actions against Persia and helping the Ionian Greeks revolting against the empire. And he thought this would not be difficult because Greece, compared to Persia, was comparatively small. And some Greeks were already under his rule. They were already part of his empire. So why not some of these other cities to the west? And until this time, the Persian army was undefeated. They were invincible. He had the largest professional army in the world. They were undefeated. And shoot, I forgot their names already. He had under him, I think they were called the Eternals, like his personal bodyguards. I think they were like 1,000 or 10,000 of them. I forgot the number now. And they were like the best warriors in his kingdom, right? And it was always 1,000 or 10,000 because if anyone died, that person was immediately replaced. So he had no doubt that this would be a quick and easy victory for the Persian Empire. And this is Herodotus's beginning of the account, is that he says the gods wanted to bring down Darius the first. So they made him proud. They made him proud. He became poisoned with hubris, overweening pride, and that's why this war happened. The First Persian War, Herodotus says the Greeks were not a serious threat to the Persian Empire because at this time the Greek cities didn't have any ambitions. They didn't want to be an empire. They just wanted to live their own lives in their little democratic city-states. They could have been just left alone in peace. But Darius wanted to conquer them. So he did not have to attack. Athens was hostile, but they were not about to invade Persia, right? They were not a threat. Shoot, I'm sorry, I can't resist the temptation right now with what is happening in Iran today. Let me just make this quick point, right? The United States was not under attack by Iran, right? So this was not the United States defending itself because it was under any threat of attack. It attacked Iran for very similar reasons, right? This isn't a controversial thing I'm saying, for very similar reasons. The United States and Israel thought this war would be quick and easy because they had far superior weapons, right? They thought the war could end in maybe several days, a couple of weeks. But that is the thing about war. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but that is the thing about war. Things do not always happen according to your wishes. So Darius didn't have to attack. He wasn't defending his empire. He just wanted, it was his desire. He wanted to conquer Greece, to punish them, but also conquer. So his decision was based on ambition for more territory, pride, hubris. And this is something that Professor Fears is one of the references that I showed you, right? The American scholar. He said of this, he said, the invasion is an example that power is a universal value. When we have power, we always want more of it. I'm not sure if that is a universal value in history. In talking about history, is power a universal value? Does everyone want power and more power? Do all countries want that? Maybe he's right. What is happening today is different countries wanting more power. So I just wanted to throw that in. Maybe that's an open question, right? This is the kind of thing that you guys may want to think about. Is the history of all the countries always about gaining more power? I mean, we don't want to say power, maybe gaining more leverage, gaining some advantage economically, politically, militarily. In 492 BCE, Darius attacked Greece, but he was defeated. The Persian army outnumbered the Greeks 3-1, but they were still defeated at, this is the final battle, I suppose, the major battle at Marathon. And that word is famous because once the Greeks defeated the Persians, the messenger ran all the way back to Athens, and then he gave the message, we won, and then apparently he died or something. So in his honor, in his memory, we run the marathon today. The lesson that he should have learned Darius the Great was that the Persian army was not invincible against the Greeks. The Greeks were not like the others. He had to be careful, right? He had to learn the lesson from this defeat. And also that a small number fighting against an invading force can defeat a larger army. So it is not the same defending your country and attacking another country, right? There has to be a very good reason for attacking another country. If you just want more territory, right? It is much more difficult. It is always more difficult to attack another country because the people who are defending are much more motivated, right? To fight, to defend their loved ones, defend their homes, defend their city, culture, tradition, whatever it is. So that is another lesson that he should have learned. But this is one of these ancient carvings. This is Darius the Great, the second king, right? And this is his son, Xerxes. Xerxes, he turns out to be even more of a fool than his father, according to Herodotus. So now we're going to the Second Persian War from 480 to 479. Darius wanted to invade Greece again. He did not learn his lesson because, again, the gods were punishing him by making him proud. So Darius set his sight on invading Greece again, but he died suddenly in 486. And so his son, Xerxes I, became king, and he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps in invading and conquering Greece. So Persia invaded Greece again in 480 C. Sorry, hey, wait a minute. That should be BCE. I forgot the B there. Please write down B. My apologies. I don't know where the B went. With a massive army. Herodotus recorded 2.5 million soldiers, and scholars say that was probably him exaggerating. They didn't have such numbers back then, and scholars say it was probably more like 200,000, but still it was a huge, huge number. So imagine 200,000 soldiers marching from all the way to from Persia to Greece. It was a huge undertaking. There were, at this time, about 1,000 Greek cities. So there were many, many Greeks scattered all throughout the Mediterranean. About 1,000 Greek cities. But of those 1,000 Greek cities, only about 70 Greek cities joined the alliance led by Athens and Sparta to fight against the Persians. What about all the rest? What about 930 Greek cities? They just simply didn't care. Or maybe they thought there's no way you can win against Persia, right? And some of the Greek cities were actually friendly with the Persians. So not every Greek city joined. It was about 70 Greek cities led by Athens and Sparta that resisted. And so right, many were afraid to fight. Some marched with the Persians, and it seemed foolish not to. Oh, I can't resist. Shoot, we have time, right? Right now, the United States wants Korea to march with them, right? Let us open the Strait of Hormuz. It's even asking China to join, which is a very weird thing for the United States to do. So I think this is why people, they're becoming more and more afraid because it doesn't make sense. What some of the things that President Trump is saying simply doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you be asking China for help? Because at least some people in China are thinking the reason why the United States attacked Iran is because of China, right? So it's, okay, so I'm sorry, that was a distraction. For many Greek cities, it seemed foolish not to fight alongside Persians against their brethren, because who can go against the Persians? Xerxes believed the war would be easy. Again, he had too much confidence. God's curse was upon him. He had hubris. This is Herodotus. because he was a religious man, I suppose. But at the pass of, let me see if I get this right, Thermopylae, the pass of Thermopylae. It's a very famous place, and I actually have the picture here. This is the pass of Thermopylae. Thermopylae. This is where King Leonidas of the Spartan 300 made their stand. Apparently, it wasn't just 300 Spartans, it was Spartans plus about 5,000 Greeks. So it wasn't just 300. So the Greeks held back the Persians for 2 days. This is probably the most famous tale from the war. The Spartans, they thought they could hold out much longer, and then they were betrayed. They were betrayed by a fellow Greek. If you saw the movie 300, it's an old movie now already, right? These all like half naked men, fighting, very violent. Yeah, maybe you don't want to see the movie, but many aspects of what happened actually is reflected in that movie, including the betrayal. They were betrayed by a local Greek, and this betrayal led the Persian to go around the pass and to attack the Greeks from behind the mountains. So knowing that they were doomed, apparently the story is, this is sort of the legendary story, right? The Spartans said, okay, you other Greeks, you go back to your home cities and defend your city. We are going to stay. We're going to fight until every one of us dies for the honor of Sparta. Oh, and, uh, so, yeah, this is a movie of that incident, that event, the pass of Thermopylae. And one of the reasons how the Greeks, the 300, for example, could defeat or hold back hundreds of thousands of Persian soldiers was because of this thing that they had. It's called the Spartan phalanx formation. And it's like, just like in the movies, this is like a sort of a technological advance, I suppose. You build this shield, a wall of this shield, and then you do not allow anyone to get past the shield. And it's like they have these long spears, and then you try to pierce anyone that tries to come through the shield. And I could talk about this a little bit more, but then we would run out of time. But this was a technological advancement that the Greeks had, and this is one of the things that made them such formidable fighting force. And there were many Greek merchants. Not merchants, mercenaries. They would go to these different countries and fight for these different kingdoms. And this was one of their techniques, fighting techniques. Very efficient, very hard to fight against. Oh, and here's I don't know, I just got it off the internet. The phalanx formation, they call it, right? And I think the Romans kind of imitated some of this as well. The Roman, wall of shields. It's from this kind of technique, fighting technique. So the Spartans held them off for a few days, and then Xerxes reached Athens. He burned down the city, and his wise advisors said, "We have such superiority of numbers. Let us send different divisions of our army to different cities, and that will scatter the Greeks because they would have to go to their home cities, and defend their individual cities. And then we'll just pick them off like one by one, right? Because we have such superiority of numbers." But Xerxes, in his pride, wanted a splendid, huge battle. So he didn't listen to his advisors. His advisor said, "Let us force the Greek army to disperse to defend their own cities." And he said, "No, I want a big battle." So he wanted a big naval battle to finish the war quickly. And that led to this thing that we call the Battle of Salamis near Athens. This is near Athens still. The city's burned down, but the Greeks, they had their navy. 1,000 plus bigger, heavier Persian ships. The Greeks only had 380. But the Greek commander was this brilliant technician named Themistocles. He was their Shin, basically, one of these like brilliant admirals, brilliant strategist. He lured the Persians to narrow straits. He outmaneuvered and destroyed all their ships. It was this amazing victory for the Greeks. And this picture shows Xerxes looking on as his ships burned and were destroyed. So they lost this Battle of Salamis. It was a big blow to the Persians, but the Persians still had many, many more soldiers. They could have kept going with the war, but something happened in Persia and Xerxes had to return home. So he left his generals to continue fighting. So that was a sort of a cowardly thing for him to do, or maybe he got bored. I don't know. But he left the war. He left the battle. And then his generals kept going. The final war came at the Battle of Plataea, and the Greeks again outnumbered 3-1. They won decisively, and that ended the war. The Greek victory at this point is seen in terms of history as an inflection point. From this point on, the Persian Empire began to decline. So this is where the Persian Empire began to fade away and the Greeks began to ascend. And this would start, I think I said, this was the beginning of the Greek classical period, 480. Okay, so that is the Greek victory. Herodotus is not finished. He tells one final story in his book, and this is called Herodotus's final warning. Warning to who? Not to the Persians. He's warning to the Athenians. His readers are fellow Athenians. And he wrote this short episode at the end. What is this episode? So the Persians have been defeated. He said it was hubris that led Darius and Xerxes to abuse the power that was given to them by the gods. And so the gods brought their wrath down upon their empire because of hubris. We must always be humble before the gods. And those that God would want to destroy, they, I guess, infect them with this thing, this curse of pride. And then he continues, once the Persians were defeated, the Athenians and the Spartans had a disagreement. They had a disagreement. The Athenians wanted to keep going and capture the Greek city of Sestos. It was one of the eastern Greek cities that were under the Persian control. So it was a Greek city that was under the Persian control. And the Athenians said, let us, because the Persians are running away, right? Let us chase them and go all the way to Sestos and liberate our fellow Greeks. And the Spartans said, no, we just want to go home and live in peace, right? The Athenians said, no, let us take more land. Let us go attack them because they're running away. In some ways, this was about, not at this point, but Herodotus is talking about the future here, right? This was about becoming an empire. The Athenians wanted it, the Spartans didn't, he says. Well, he implies that's the implication of this episode. So the Spartans went home, the Athenians went ahead and conquered, liberated the city from the Persians, Sestos. They liberated their fellow Greeks. So that was a good thing, right? You liberate your fellow Greeks from an empire. That in itself could be seen as a good thing. They captured the city. But then this is what the Athenians did, according to Herodotus. They captured the Persian governor. I was practicing the name. Artaxerxes, I think that's how you say it. Artaxerxes. That could be wrong. So this Persian governor, apparently he was not a good man. He was an evil man, maybe. But they tortured him and they crucified him. They wanted to punish him. And then as he was dying, they also brought forth before him his son, his young son. And they stoned his young son to death. in front of him. Yeah, that's a picture. I don't know. I just got this off the internet. I'm sure this isn't the Greeks, but I mean, stoning someone to death is a horrible thing, right? So, as he was being crucified, this Persian governor, he had to witness his son being stoned to death in front of him. Herodotus seems to be asking, why? Why did we do this, us Athenians? So this was his warning. Are we not in danger of becoming like our enemies? Had Athens been so cruel before? Why did we have to do this? Empires angered the gods and they destroyed themselves. Let us not change. This was his warning to the Athenians, right? Let us not change. We can defend our city, but let us stay the way we are. Let us not become like the Persians and then invite the wrath of the gods. So that is Herodotus and his histories. Very famous book, the first history book. So let us move on. I'm just checking the time. I think I have enough time. So now comes the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War is actually two separate wars. I think some scholars say it's actually three wars, but the whole thing is called Peloponnesian War. I should say, sometimes when we say the Peloponnesian War, it's actually talking about the Second War, and sometimes it's both, first and second, and then sometimes it's talking about all the way down to when Athens surrendered to Sparta, which is, I think, 404 BCE. So this is the first Peloponnesian War from 460 to 445. So 460, that's like 20 years after the Persian invasion, right? 460, a lot happened in those 20 years. What happened in those 20 years? Well, we saw the rise of the Athenian Empire. The Athenian Empire. It didn't call itself an empire. They were calling themselves leagues. They were calling themselves leagues. The cause for the Peloponnesian War, this is between Athens and Sparta, between two Greek cities. So do we say it was a civil war? No, it wasn't a civil war because they were separate city-states, like they were separate countries, right? Athens saw itself as the champion of all the Greek cities. And Athens wanted to liberate all the Greek cities scattered all throughout the Mediterranean. Athens wanted to fight Persia, fight all the other kingdoms, and liberate the entire world in the name of freedom and democracy, because Athens was a democracy, right? The Greek city-states or democratic places, most of them, right, in their different forms, surrounded by these, kingdoms that were not democratic. Athens wanted to liberate other Greek cities. Sparta saw it as expansionist, and they opposed the Athenian attempt. So soon, Greek cities began to separate themselves into two camps. That's a bit simplistic. Apparently, what actually the actual situation was, Sparta had something called the Peloponnesian League. So this league wasn't a newly formed league. This actually existed from before the Persian War. So the Peloponnesian League was the old structure, the old power structure. And Sparta was the center of this old power structure. It's called the Peloponnesian League. But after the Persian War, Athens began to liberate more Greek cities, and then Athens created a separate league that shared its vision, right, of liberating the other Greek cities. And they called themselves the Delian League. It was formed in 478, right, just 1 year after the end of the Greco-Persian War. Cities that shared Athens' vision of a greater Greece joined the Delian League. So the Peloponnesian League was much bigger, but then Athens became bigger and bigger, catching up in some ways, catching up to the Peloponnesian League. And sooner or later, this would create problems. Athens said, let us take the fight to Persia. Let us become an empire of democracy and liberty. They liberated numerous Greek cities and islands along the coastal Asia Minor. All were encouraged to join the coalition. This was the coalition of the willing. Nobody was forced to join. This was one of liberty, freedom, and more freedom, right? We bring you liberty and freedom, democracy. And soon, the Delian League swelled to over 300 cities. By that point, I mean, you have to say, okay, it's a kind of empire, right? The Athenian Empire was forming, and I'm sure this wasn't a neat division, but Sparta and the Peloponnesian League were stronger land power. Their army was, I guess, undefeatable, but Athens, because it was right by the sea, it became a sea empire. Their strength lay in their navies. Still, there was no reason at this point why these two superpowers in this region couldn't coexist peacefully. They could have gotten along, right? They could have stayed friendly, but they began to have more and more conflict. And at this time, I'm not missing anything, right? So there was no reason why they couldn't peacefully coexist. But at this time, there was this man, and by all accounts, he was a great man. He wasn't a villain. He was a great man, a man of honor, a man of great, I guess, sense of morality, vision. Pericles, one of the most famous Greek statesman, general. He was the leader of Athens, and he was such an influential figure during his rule that we call this period when he ruled Athens the Age of Pericles. The Age of Pericles from 462 to 429. And some scholars, at least, call this Athens' Golden Age, because Pericles was not only a military man, he was very cultured, um, literary, and he encouraged building of these fancy like buildings and temples, and he encouraged literature, philosophy, all that, right? He was almost a perfect leader of Athens. So this is the age of Pericles, the golden age of Athens. And he was a great orator. He had this golden tongue, right? He could persuade people. The Athenians were all great at rhetoric, but he was a very persuasive speaker. And he had a vision. Pericles had a vision. So now we're talking about, this is a story being told by Thucydides, right? Thucydides, who wrote the Peloponnesian War. Pericles' vision was, our destiny, Athenians, our destiny is to be an empire. Our democratic way of life will be a light unto the world, a light unto the world, a rule of the people, by the people, for the people. I'm not making this up. This is what he said. I mean, you associate this with Lincoln, right? Rule of the people, by the people, for the people. We are a light unto the world. We are a democracy. He believed in the ideals of Athens. He was unabashedly expansionist. We will bring the gift of democracy, the gift of liberty and equality, fraternity, brotherhood of, humankind. The world is just waiting for us to liberate them, right? Let us go out and liberate the world. That was his vision. Delian League, all who join will be free and democratic, united in trade, economy, and protected. It'd be like sort of like the NATO, right? If anyone attacked one of our members, then we will come to their aid. We'll unite all the Greek cities first, and then we'll unite the world under the ideals of Athenian democracy. That was his vision. And the Peloponnesian League, Sparta, did not share that vision. And so Delian League saw Athens, Peloponnesian League saw the Delian League as a threat. a growing threat. And they actually have a term for this. This is a modern term. Like this term started being used only in the 20th century. But nowadays, people talk about this term. They call it Thucydides trap. It's a fairly recently coined term by some historian. I'm sorry, I think the political scientist. So Thucydides trap is basically, do I talk about it? Thucydides trap is when an old great power sees a newer power growing, there's always conflict and it will almost inevitably lead to war. These days, Thucydides trap is being applied to the United States and China. When people talk about the United States being on a war footing, right? War footing against China, they talk about Thucydides trap. The United States is the old power. It seems to be declining. China is the new and upcoming superpower. What do? The United States has to become more and more hostile because that is Thucydides trap. Why can't we just get along? History doesn't support that kind of turn of events. So what happened that triggered the war was there was a conflict between Corinth, was a Greek city that was part of the Peloponnesian League. It belonged to the Spartan camp. There was a conflict between Corinth and some smaller cities, and Corinth was competing against Athens, I guess, commercially. And that lit the fuse for the war in 460 BCE. That's how the war started. A fight between two smaller cities, but then that little fight grew into the Peloponnesian League and the Delian League fighting against each other. The first war lasted 15 years. A series of naval battles raged, but no decisive victories were won by either side. The war ended in 445, 15 years later, simply because both sides were exhausted. They signed the 30 years peace treaty, but no one was happy because no one won anything. They just became tired, and too many people died to continue the war. So they signed the peace treaty, but no one was happy. Peace was fragile because the underlying problems that caused the war, those problems were still there. It was fragile. Then, sorry, how many years after that? It wasn't too long. 31. So about 15 years later. So this was only halfway into the 30 years peace. So the treaty was only halfway through, about 15 years later. Another conflict, I guess like a fire, right? Little spark, a conflict flared up, and it involved again Corinth and yet another Greek city. And Pericles, who was itching for a fight again, Pericles jumped at the chance and he reneged on the peace treaty. He started the war. Pericles restarts the war. And this is a famous, I think this was a funeral, or this actually, the speech was given after the war started, I think, a little bit after. And then he was at a funeral. He gave this really famous speech, and it was recorded by Thucydides, famous speech by Pericles. He said he believed that Athens had to defeat Sparta if we want to claim our destiny. Sparta is an obstacle we must overcome. It's a death struggle. We cannot coexist with Sparta, right? One of us has to die, kind of thing, right? This is an existential struggle. His argument, Sparta is pushing us. The latest conflict, Sparta is pushing us. If we give in, it'll continue to push. Sparta is the bully, you see. We have to fight back. And if we fight, we will surely win because we have more money. We are richer than Sparta. We have better technology. We have the sea power. We have our strong city walls for defense. Apparently, Athens at this time had like double protection, like double walls, and it was considered very hard to penetrate. So strong walls for defense. And he said, this will be a war of attrition. This will be a long and difficult war. So the winner will be the one who survives the longest. And we can win because we have the resources, we have the sea, we have our naval power. Um, we'll just stay safe within the city walls and attack attack Sparta from here and there and everywhere using our ships. So we will blockade their ships, we will raid their cities, right? Like like guerrilla tactics, right? Attack them where they're not expecting us. And we will wear them down, they will ultimately break. This was his strategy. Heracles knew what he was talking about because he was a wise man. Everything he said was factually correct. His decision to fight was a perfectly rational, based on sound judgment. It was a perfectly rational base. I think I missed something there. Perfectly rational decision based on sound judgment. And he restarted this preemptive war for the best of reasons. He started it for the best of reasons, for democratic freedom and for the glory of Athens, the empire of freedom, the empire of democracy. And then Thucydides says, there's just one problem. He calls it the imponderables of war, the imponderables of war. This problem is that with wars, there are unforeseen consequences. We cannot control war. Almost by definition, war is uncontrollable. The imponderables of war happened right after the war started. Heracles' strategy to bring everyone inside the walls of Athens seemed sound. The city was linked to the sea. They could get all the food needed from their allies. But then once the fighting began, a plague broke out inside the city, killing about 10% in the city. So this is a picture that I got of people burning dead bodies. They believe it was typhoid, but this is speculation. Some plague broke out and it killed about 10% in the city. Pericles, I think children died as well. He famously rallied the Athenians. We cannot back down now. We are now committed because the war is happening, right? We must see this war to the finish, to final victory. Again, one of his glorious speeches, right? To cheer everybody on, motivate people. Everyone cheered. And then Pericles died. He fell victim to this disease, typhoid, I guess, right? Plague. He died. 429, right after the war started. Right after starting the war, the man himself died. 2 years after restarting the war, he was a victim of the plague. This was an example of the imponderables of war. Thucydides laments Pericles' death. He said it was a blow to Athens because Athens, after Pericles, fell apart. Without a leader, without a great leader to guide the city started to fall apart. Alas, the death of Pericles, right? All was undone because he died. That is the tragedy of the Athenians. The Athenians continued to fight, but after 10 more years, again, exhausted, nobody was winning. They had had enough. Again, people wanted peace out of sheer exhaustion. At this point, enter Nicias. I think some people say Nicias. I checked. I think the proper pronunciation is Nicias. Another peace treaty was signed in 421, and this was called the Peace of Nicias. Nicias, named after the Athenian politician who made it happen, Nicias of Athens. Nicias. So this is now we're getting into the parallel lives by Plutarch, the later Greek Roman historian. So from here, it's storytelling plus character studies. I'm just checking the time. I don't want to run out of time, so let me just keep moving. Nicias was an interesting character. He was first a rich, successful businessman. Think of a millionaire or I guess these days we have to say a billionaire. He had all the money in the world, and now he wanted fame and respect. So he bought his way into being a politician. He wanted office for the prestige of the office, and the Athenians elected him, believing that he would be a successful politician as well. And he was. He was a great politician. He gave the people what they wanted. He saw that people wanted peace, so he negotiated with the Spartans and signed this peace, the Peace of Nicaea. He was a cautious and peaceful man, known for moderation and restraint. He was a good example of a typical politician: follow the will of the public, give the public what it wants. He would say, in a democracy, that is what you do. You give the people what they want. They wanted peace, so I gave them peace. He soon became a leading statesman in Athens, became very famous, Nicias of Athens. But like the first peace treaty, people eventually began to complain. Again, I think it was just not long after the first one, by 415. So this is only this time around. First time it was 15 years after the peace treaty, right? This time, 421, by 415, this is only 6 years later, people were now itching for a fight again. How foolish are we human beings, especially the young Athenians, the young men of Athens? They were itching for a fight again. Only after about 6 years. Things are still the same as before. So many of us died. What was that all for? Right? What was all that sacrifice for? For nothing? Discontent arose both in Athens and in Sparta and other cities as well. Right? They had their rest. They recuperated. They're healthy, militaristic, right? Warriors. They wanted to fight. In case I didn't mention this already, I should have mentioned this, sorry. The Greeks were a militaristic people. In case I didn't say that before, like their heroes were the heroes of Homeric battles, right? Achilles, Odysseus, right? They wanted to die in battle. That was the culture. That was the Greek culture, right? Everyone wanted to be a warrior. So that's something that we should keep in mind as well. So by 415 BCE, dissatisfaction rose to a fever pitch. People were again itching for a fight. If we had just fought one more campaign season, we would have won. Why did we stop? They began to complain. Then came this man, Alcibiades, who was the young nephew of Pericles. So he is this fascinating character. So he is one of the figures that Plutarch wrote about, Alcibiades. So he is the main character that we'll be talking about from this point on. Alcibiades is famous not only in history, not only as a military commander general, he was also known as maybe the first celebrity in ancient Greece. He was apparently very, very handsome, beautiful. Everybody wanted to sleep with him, apparently. And he appears in Plato's dialogues as well. One of Plato's dialogues called Symposium has Alcibiades wanting Socrates. He wants to sleep with Socrates because, he adores Socrates, and yet Socrates is the only man in Athens who resists Alcibiades' charms. Something like that. I don't know. So this is Alcibiades. Here's another picture of Alcibiades. So apparently he was this incredibly charismatic young man. His father died in the First Peloponnesian War, and so Pericles adopted Alcibiades as his son. So he was Pericles' adopted son. He was handsome, brilliant, charismatic, but Plutarch says he was a selfish man. He was not a good man. He too dreamed of Athens as a superpower, but according to Plutarch, his reasons were all wrong. He wanted glory. He wanted to be ultimately some kind of king of an empire. He was a selfish man. And then the spark that came for the Second Peloponnesian War came in the form of this Sicilian city of Segesta. They came to Athens asking for help because they got into a fight with another Sicilian city called Selinus. They wanted Athens' help because Segesta was a small city. So when this news broke, Alcibiades said, let us use this occasion to go to Sicily, to the west of Greece. Sicily is an island now to the south of Italy, right? It's a huge island. Let us take this as an opportunity to go to Sicily. Let us conquer the island. Because Sicily apparently is a very soil-rich place. It's like a breadbasket kind of place, right? So if we conquer Sicily, that will give us enough resources to restart the war and this time finish off Sparta for good. So that was his argument. What did we gain by the treaty with Sparta? Pericles started the war for a good reason, and those reasons are still valid. Sparta will surely strike again. If we don't strike first, they will come at us anyway. So let us take this as an opportunity and go to Sicily. The danger is we know Sparta will eventually attack us with Corinth and Syracuse was a major city in Sicily, and Syracuse was apparently friendly with Sparta. All the cities in Sicily were officially neutral. They were supposed to be neutral officially. But Athenians suspected that Syracuse, one of the most powerful cities in Sicily, was on the side of Sparta. So Alcibiades' reasoning was, let us go to Sicily and take those guys down. We liberate the island of Sicily. Liberate them. Turn them into like democratic city-states like us. And then we'll turn around and attack Sparta. We'll win the war this time around. The third time is the charm or something. He didn't say it, I'm just saying. The third time is the charm. Why not preemptively strike Syracuse first? This is an opportunity. Sure, there's danger, right? I'm sorry, we have the danger Sparta will attack us anyway. This is an opportunity. Segesta is asking us to help in fighting Selinus. Let us help Segesta, then attack Syracuse. Sicilians will welcome us as liberators. That was his argument, Alcibiades, great orator that he is. And then Nicias, this is how the dialogue goes. They're in an assembly, huge assembly. The other Athenians are listening. Nicias stands up and he says, we must not start another war. This is crazy, right? Because he's the one who signed the peace treaty only 6 years before. He said, his argument is, you know that Alcibiades is a known liar. He lies all the time. And we know that he is charismatic, beautiful, though he is ambitious, and he wants power. There is no evidence that Sparta is planning to attack us. What is happening in Sicily, Segesta and Selinus, that has nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us, right? What is going on here? And Alcibiades stands up. He says, Nicias is an old man. Politely, he's saying he's a coward, right? He's an old man. Ignore him. To the new generation, right? To us younger people belong glory and honor, right? Let us take this opportunity and do something glorious for our city. The assembly sided with Alcibiades. It voted to send 134 ships and 35,000 soldiers to Sicily. This has come to be known as the Sicilian expedition. Everything looked promising because how could these little Sicilian cities resist us, the Athenian, battle-hardened Athenian soldiers, Athenian army and navy? Athens would restart the war by first conquering Sicily, but to hold Alcibiades in check, the assembly, the Athenian assembly, to hold Alcibiades in check because they didn't trust Alcibiades. They bought into his argument, but they did not trust the man because they knew that he was ambitious. So in order to keep him in check, they chose two other generals to go on the expedition with him. Nicias, because he was against the war. So you go with Alcibiades and keep him in check. And they chose another to go there as a general, a battle-hardened older soldier named Lamachus. I'm sorry, Lamachus. It was foolish. I think this is Thucydides talking about this. It was foolish to have three commanders. What was the Athenians thinking? Right, you're sending an expedition to Sicily, this huge island, 35,000 soldiers, all these ships, and you have three heads. What were you thinking? They thought they were doing a wise thing. Instead of one commander, they had three generals who had to share power. And then just before the ships, I don't want to get into this too much, just before they were set to sail, this strange thing happened in Athens where the statues of god Hermes were vandalized, all except the one at Alcibiades' house. It was a strange event where there was a kind of desecration of the statues. The temple of Hermes is a god of messenger. All these statues were destroyed, and people suspected Alcibiades and his friends got drunk the night before, and they started destroying these statues. So they said, well, we'll deal with this scandal once the expedition comes back. But Alcibiades, we want you to know that, we won't forget this thing. When you come back, we'll, have some kind of court, some kind of trial to see whether you're innocent or not. So at the beginning, there was this cloud hanging under Alcibiades because of this strange scandal of the statues of the gods being desecrated. So that's how the expedition started. They set sail in June 415, summer, to take Syracuse, but Sicilian cities refused to harbor them. The only cities that allowed them to rest in their cities were Naxos and Catania. And I have a picture here, just so that you guys know, this is Sicily, south of Italy. So Segesta, this is the ancient map. Segesta and Selinus, these were the two small cities that were fighting each other. And Segesta is the city that came to Athens asking for help. And the story is these ships could not dock. They could not go into any harbor because all these cities, they got scared, right? They got scared and they said, I'm sorry, we can't harbor you, right? Because if we harbor you, maybe Spartans will think we're on your side and they'll come and attack us. We have to remain neutral. So only these two cities on the east coast of the island, Naxos and Catania, allowed them to rest at their harbors. And so these ships, the Athenian ships, kept sailing around the island. This wasn't what they expected. They thought they would be welcomed by these smaller cities because they wanted to be free of, where is Syracuse? This is Syracuse. So can you see, this is Syracuse. On the east, southern east, and so Syracuse is the most powerful city in Sicily. So Alcibiades wanted to persuade the cities to join them in their cause. They wanted the cities to join them. And Alcibiades said, you know how charismatic I am, right? Give me a little bit of time. I will convince them to join us. Nicias said, look, this expedition is already going sideways, right? This is not what we thought things would be like. Let us go back even now, right? Nobody's died. Nobody started any war. Not yet. We can still have peace. Let us go back. And Lamachus wanted to attack Syracuse right away because he was the soldier, right? He said, let us surprise Syracuse. Forget about Segesta and these other cities. We came here to attack Syracuse. Let us attack them right now. Surprise that's our advantage. They could not agree. And so ultimately Lamachus sided with Alcibiades. So they spent the summer just sailing around the island over and over again, trying to convince the people. And then something, this isn't fiction. This is a story that actually happened. And then, so I guess this is after a few months, a ship came from Athens to take Alcibiades back to Athens because apparently they discovered some new evidence accusing Alcibiades in desecrating these statues. So they wanted to take Alcibiades back to Athens, maybe throw him into jail. It's a weird situation. He's one of the commanding generals, but they wanted him back. Alcibiades said, yes, I'll come. And then he jumped ship. He disappeared. And a little bit later, he appeared in Sparta. He decided to betray his own city. He was angry, right? How dare these Athenians treat me this way, right? My enemies. So I will actually help Sparta now. He appeared in Sparta. Um, so it's Alcibiades, great king, I'm Alcibiades of Athens. I can help you win the war with the Athenians. And then Spartan king says, your reputation precedes you, right? Can I trust a traitor? But knowing Alcibiades, he's this great orator, his charm, he convinced the Spartans that he could be useful to them. He let Sparta know that the Athenians were in Sicily. He's the guy who started the whole expedition, right? And now he's in Sparta, he's informing them, hey, the Athenians are trying to take over Sicily. You should go help Syracuse. I told you, he's not a good man, right? He's a selfish, beautiful, handsome, charismatic, but he was this really selfish man. He turned traitor. And so the war with Syracuse happened because by the spring of next year, Nicias and Lamachus finally decided to attack Syracuse. But they wasted, by this time, like over maybe 8-9 months now, right? And everybody's tired now because they've been sailing around the island for all that time. But then the battle proved difficult because by now Syracusans, they were ready for the Athenians, right? And then yet another imponderables of war, the battle-hardened general Lamachus was killed in one of the initial battles. He charged into battle headlong. I guess he was, overzealous, but he was killed. So now we have a situation where Nicias was the only general left in command. Nicias, who did not want to fight. Thucydides' imponderables of war. Who could have predicted that Alcibiades would turn traitor, Lamachus would get killed, Nicias, who didn't want to fight, would be left in charge? On Alcibiades' advice, Sparta sent its army to Sicily, and by the winter of 414, the war turned disastrous for the Athenians because the Spartans were there now helping the Syracusans, and it was close to being destroyed. Nicias sent a message to Athens. Let us go back. We can still salvage this expedition. We can't win now, right? I want to go home. Either allow us to come back to Athens or at least let me go back. Right? I'm not a warrior, right? I'm not fit to command this expedition. Send somebody else. I don't want to be here anymore. And they said, no, you must stay. The Athenians, they said, you must stay. The casualties were heavy. Sicilians had not welcomed them, but they could not retreat now because they were in too deep. They were too committed now to this war, because if they retreated now, what would they say? Right? What would what would the other Greek cities say? They would lose face. And then the league could scatter, right? So we must win this war. We're committed now. So they decided to double down, and they sent another massive expedition in 413 to help Nicias. But by the time they arrived, it was too late, because this is already 2 years later now, right? It was too late. His forces were all but spent. Syracusans blockaded the Athenian ships. After more defeats, Athenians had to abandon their ships and flee on land. But what was land? The land was the island of Sicily. So they were trapped on the island. I have some ships. Yeah, this is a picture of the Athenian ships getting destroyed. So they had to abandon their ships and then run away in Sicily. And I'm kind of running out of time, right? So at first they fought valiantly, but then they got tired. It was a foreign land for them. They ended up being hunted like animals. And toward the end, there's this a passage where the Athenians were now being hunted like animals, and they got so hungry and thirsty. They got to this river, and the river was turning red with the blood of the Athenian soldiers. But because they were so thirsty, some of the soldiers began drinking the blood tainted water, even as they were being slaughtered. That's how tragic the story became. Nicias surrendered and he begged the Syracusans to stop slaughtering the Athenians. Uh, they were not merciful to Nicias. They captured him, they tortured him, and he died a horrible death, according to the story. And then the surviving Athenians, those who survived, were enslaved and they were sent to work in the mines of Syracuse, because they attacked Syracuse. And very few Athenians made it back to Athens. The aftermath of the expedition is this was a disastrous expedition, and this greatly weakened Athens. And because of what happened in Sicily, many of the Delian leagues began to defect because they saw how foolish Athens had become. I just want to, Athens tried to hold on, but it was ultimately taken by Sparta in 404 BCE. So this is already like, no, I'm sorry, this is still 11 years after. So they struggled on for 11 more years. Let me just tell you briefly about what happened to Alcibiades, because this is a fascinating story. Alcibiades was in Sparta advising the Spartan king. And the story is he began an affair with the queen. He was a beautiful man, right? So maybe the queen seduced him. I don't know. He began an affair with the Spartan king. And the rumor went around she became pregnant. And the child was not the king's child, but Alcibiades' child. So he had to flee Sparta because the Spartan king now wanted to kill him. Where could he go but to Persia? He went to Persia, he surfaced in Persia, and he began to advise the Persian king, began to talk about the balance of power. Right? You don't want Athens or Sparta to win, right? So help Athens a little bit here, help Sparta here. And the story goes that he secretly began to help Athens a little bit. And so that was, I think, 412. About 5 years later, 407, he went back to Athens. And Athens welcomed him as their savior. All is forgiven. Your betrayal, we'll forgive you. Just save us from Sparta. So he was welcomed back to the city. They still adored him, their Alcibiades, and they made him the commander of their army. But he lost some major naval battle. And then Athens wanted to kill him again, so he had to flee to Persia again. And then a few years later, Athens lost. And once the war was over, Sparta wanted him dead. So he was hiding in this Persian place. And the Persians, they sent some assassins to kill him. That's how Alcibiades died. Stranger than fiction. Story of Alcibiades. Just one last thing. So this fight between Sparta and Athens didn't end in 404. Sparta ruled over Athens just maybe over a year or something. And then the Athenians revolted. They gained their independence. They kept fighting. The Greek cities kept fighting each other. And this went on and on for decades until in 338 BCE, all the fighting stopped because came the time of Macedon and the Macedonian Empire, Alexander the Great. And this is how the Athenian story ends. I'm sorry I went a little bit over time. So next Tuesday is the story of Rome. This Thursday, we start on post-classical. Have a wonderful day, everyone.